This is Head Coach Mike from CrossFit Putney, and welcome to the first and last freestanding handstand tutorial that you're ever going to need. So when it comes to the freestanding handstand, there are actually far less prerequisites than people think there are. There is a small strength demand, which is the ability to hold yourself in a handstand against the wall. Now understand, some of us might be developing that, but it's quite a straightforward path. Other than that, yes, flexible wrists and flexible shoulders are somewhat beneficial, but they're not a need to have. You can work your way around it. So I'm going to go through the quick pointers of what you need beforehand, and if you haven't got it, how to build up to it, and then exactly what you're going to be missing. So number one, there is some adequate wrist flexibility that is necessary. And I'm going to say, if you can get your forearm roughly at 90 degrees relative to the ground, then that's going to be a really good place. Being able to get further than that is going to be helpful, but it isn't necessary. If you find you put your hand on the ground and when you go to stretch you're sort of stuck here, it doesn't mean handstands are out of the question, but it does mean it's going to be a bit harder. So some gentle stretching, working on getting that further forward, eventually getting towards 90 degrees, which will happen naturally just by practicing the handstand. You're going to be good to go. So now I'm going to show you the 3 progressions that you need to go from never doing a handstand before to being able to get all the way upside down, support your own body weight, and be confident practicing and playing without the assistance of a wall. So the first one is just going to be the plank hold. This is going to see my hands shoulder width apart, spread those fingers nice and wide. That's a personal preference, but I like to see it, and then keep my body in a nice straight line. If you can build up to a few sets, 3 sets of about 60 seconds, you're in a really good place to move on to the next progression. The next progression is going to be an L handstand on the wall. Now this can also be done on a box. I'm going to go roughly a leg's length away from the wall, and then I'm going to get my hands on the floor, feet on the wall, and get into an L-shaped position. Now on this one, 3 sets of 60 seconds is going to be pretty excessive. If you can get 3 sets of 20 to 30, you're going to be well on the way to being able to move closer into the wall. Which brings me on to the last one, is going to be chest to wall handstand holds. Now we really want to see pushing through those shoulders, trying to keep our body fairly straight, and can we get our chest, nose and thighs touching the wall. So if you're strong enough to do all of those 3, you can definitely start getting out onto the ground and playing around with a handstand. And I'm going to show you the one thing that you're missing for freestanding handstand holds. Okay, so the biggest thing that you're missing if you're trying freestanding handstands and you're not getting there, you're strong enough because you've been against the wall, but for some reason they're not getting to the point, but you can do kick-ups, is going to be the balance point. And the balance point doesn't come from where most people think. It's not having a perfectly straight line, it's not bracing your core, it's not squeezing your glutes, it's not pointing your toes, it's none of those things. It is just about being able to control your balance using your hands, your fingers and your forearms. It's as simple as that. So when we're up in a handstand and we're able to control it, if you see someone kick up and you can see they're getting good 10, 20, 30 seconds, everything is being controlled through this part of the body. Now don't get me wrong, here upwards, the lower body, it can have a big impact. If it's floppy all over the place, it makes it harder, but that's not the reason behind them being able to hold it. You can be loose and imbalanced up top, but still hold it really well as long as this bit is really strong. So I'm going to demonstrate getting into a handstand, and I'm just going to let you see how this is controlling everything and not anything upstairs in terms of legs, core, things like that. So like I said at the start, the fingers spread position is personal preference. I quite like having my fingers spread really wide and then actually pulling back on the ground, creating a gap on my knuckles. Some people prefer like this. I'm not a fan of it. You just need to experiment what works best for you. Now, in terms of the balance, the best movement to work on that I found that advanced me really quickly was actually the frog stand. So we're essentially performing the same balancing movement, but instead of having to balance this tall object with lots of positions of swaying, we're going to condense it down so it's a lot easier to control, and that balance point, that center of gravity, is much closer down towards the hands. So I'm going to take my same stance. I'm going to get my elbows to the inside of my knees and then rock forward, and again you're just going to see how my hands are doing all of the work. So if you're struggling with the balance, that's one movement that you definitely cannot avoid. The reason is because it's going to teach you to use your hands to balance. Where you put yourself in this compact ball, you can't use anything else. So if you start wriggling around, it's going to make it a lot harder. So staying in a nice tight ball and then just learning to use those hands and fingers, going back and forth between that and handstands is a really good way to practice and enhance your balance. Now there are still other things that you can do, and I'm going to show you what that's going to look like. So once you've got the frog stand nailed, and that means you're doing a few sets of 20 to 30 seconds comfortably, it's time to stick back to the wall. Now this is my favorite drill, and I honestly think it's the only drill that anyone ever needs to progress in their handstands, because it can be done for endurance and for balance. Now unlike what most people think, they kick their back up towards the wall, that's not a very good way to practice balancing a freestanding handstand. Instead, we want to climb ourselves up chest to wall, and now we want to start forcing that balance point. Essentially bringing our feet off the wall, driving our hands down into the ground to take us back against the wall, and then going back and forth. Again, we're trying to further enforce that it's our hands that are controlling taking those feet back to the wall, rather than just moving our feet off the wall itself. So I'm going to show you what a few reps look like, and you're going to get a good close-up view on how my feet are coming off and my hands are being used to push those feet back against the wall. So remember gang, handstands are a skill, they take a very, very long time, and they are often very frustrating. Progress doesn't come particularly linear like they do with lifting weights. So try and enjoy it as much as possible, keep the variation high, play around, and just have fun with it. And once you start getting a little bit better, you can play around, and you never know what you might be able to do in a few years' time. Thanks.